Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salalo Makwidi. We're going to be turning our focus now to, shall we say, an uneasy calm in the Gaza Strip. We're 9-10 days into a ceasefire, which is seemingly hanging by a thread. Civilians say they feel peace may collapse at any moment as airstrikes, aid halts, and murky governance still loom very, very large. And to give us more insight on the current assessment of the ceasefire and what we can make of it is Professor Jeff Halper, director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. And he'll be helping us unpack what's behind this fragility, the fragility of this truce and what it says about the future of Gaza's people. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on air. Really appreciate it.
Always good to be with you.
I think just your quick assessment of the current state of affairs. Currently, it's been 9 to 10 days now of this quote unquote ceasefire. What do you make of it, and how much of it do you think it's going to last, considering just how precarious the situation is right now?
Well, it's a very complex situation, really, because you have a lot of players involved. And none of which really know what they want, and they have conflicting goals. Netanyahu, first of all, is dying to continue the war. He wants to continue it both for political reasons, of course, but also, in his view, he always talked about total victory, and in his view, if this ends and there's a ceasefire, and eventually an Arab peacekeeping force comes in, maybe, or some peacekeeping force, and you begin to move towards the Abraham Accords again, and maybe some kind of a two-state solution they're talking about. He's very concerned because, he didn't break the Palestinian resistance. This was the whole idea of Gaza, was to pacify it, to get, not only to break the resistance of Hamas completely, but to eliminate it as a presence, as a political presence, as any presence, because Israel, like we've talked about before, wants the entire country of Palestine for itself. And it's willing to accept an apartheid idea. That's what the Abraham Accords are about. A Palestinian state on maybe 15% of Palestine in little tiny islands, but it has to be demilitarized and really, with no threat to Israel whatsoever. It has to even accept Israel as a Jewish state on 85% of historic Palestine. So if Hamas remains as a resistance presence on the ground, Israel hasn't closed everything down. Israel still has to deal with the demands of Palestinians, and that's why Netanyahu wants to really continue and destroy Hamas completely. On the other hand, he can't, because Trump is on his head. Vance is coming today with Kushner, and they're trying to control Netanyahu because Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize, basically. It has nothing to do with anything else. And the difference now is that the Arab and Muslim countries, not only Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, but also Turkey, are today more involved than they were. And it's interesting, not because of anything having to do with the Palestinians, but because of Jared Kushner's and Witkoff's sons' financial interests in the Arab countries, especially in Qatar and in Saudi Arabia. And so they have now an opening to the White House. They have a kind of a channel of communication that they didn't have before Trump. Biden had nothing to do with anything in the Middle East whatsoever. And that's given them some clout. So I think my fear is that the Arab states themselves might agree to an apartheid situation when we get to the Abraham Accords. But in the meantime, I think the Arab states and the Trump administration are going to keep the ceasefire. And at least we're going to get to a place where there's some stabilization. Now, what happens with Hamas is interesting, because Hamas is reasserting its control. So how that is going to go together with a peacekeeping force coming. Who's going to really run Gaza? They don't want Tony Blair. The Palestinians refuse Tony Blair as a colonist guy. But so I think it's going to be a real question between Israel keeping up the pressure and still wanting to destroy Hamas, Hamas trying to reassert its control, and this peacekeeping force coming in and trying to govern Gaza.
Mm, mm, mm. And I wanted to touch on, I think, the point that you just passed on right now, which I think is a major sticking point. The question of governance, who will govern Gaza, who holds security, and what happens to the arms that are held by Hamas at this point, because that has been one of the terms and conditions that were put up in that Donald Trump Gaza peace plan. These are very important issues. Could you walk us through that, the governance, and why it's so critical to this fragile peace?
Well, there's two different agendas. The agenda of Trump in the Arab world and Netanyahu to some degree is, Gaza is pacified, it's quietized. There's a governance of Gaza, whether it's Blair or an Arab peacekeeping force or whatever, just to govern the daily life until maybe the Palestinian Authority comes back. It's not really clear what the government is going to be. And Hamas, yes, Hamas is disarmed. And not only disarmed, but really Hamas will be exiled. So it could not be a political force at all. Now, all of this, from the Palestinian point of view, especially from Hamas's point of view, of course, is a colonial outcome, because Hamas does see itself, if not militarily anymore, certainly a major political force. So I'm not sure if it's going to agree to disarm. Trump has threatened to disarm it. So Israel could really be allowed to come back in, and then we're going to get a resurgence of all of this. That's really not clear what's going to happen. They might get into a deal where Hamas passes on its arms to the peacekeeping force. We'll have to see about that. But the problem is, what about the solution to all of this? Where are we going? Beyond just Gaza isn't a self-standing issue. Once you begin to talk about the Palestinian Authority coming in, you start talking about the Abraham Accords again, you're getting back into this apartheid thing. So the Palestinians are really fearful that, yes, Hamas will be disarmed, Hamas will be neutralized as a political force. There'll be some stability in Gaza, but that's where it's going to stay. And then what happens to the whole bigger Palestinian struggle? I mean, the whole attack on October 7th and this whole issue of Gaza wasn't because of Gaza. It's a part of the wider Palestinian struggle. We can't lose sight of that. So the Palestinians' fear is there'll be some kind of technical colonial arrangement made to govern Gaza. That issue will disappear. Israel will remain in control. And then the whole point of the attack, the political point of the attack on October 7th, and the wider Palestinian struggle is lost. So I think Palestinians are really concerned not to lose that focus, that there be a connection between stabilizing Gaza, but also really dealing with the Palestinian issue. And in that, they do not have confidence in Trump, certainly, but they really don't have much confidence in the Arab world either. So we'll have to see where they are.
Just lastly, before I let you go, and I think this also touches a bit on the point that you're making, South Africa vowing to continue the genocide case against Israel at the ICJ, despite this ceasefire. How important are actions like these as we continue to look at the bigger and broader picture, and not just the here and now, as is seemingly the focus and the case for Israel and the United States of America, to forget about the broader continued oppression and occupation of Palestinian lands and people?
No, yeah, that's right. I mean, South Africa should definitely continue the genocide trial. The genocide trial isn't about Gaza, and when there's a ceasefire, everything is fine. A genocide was committed, and Israel has to be held accountable. When you commit a crime, you don't walk away and, all right, the crime's done, let's forget about it. The crime is the crime. It has to be dealt with. There has to be accountability for genocide, and we have to remember that the genocide is ongoing. I mean, it's certainly, it's ongoing in all, the starvation in Gaza has not ended. Israel is still trying to interrupt food supplies. There's still no infrastructure. People are still starving. There's no medical, and Israel is not doing anything to try to lessen the suffering in Gaza whatsoever. So the genocide is still continuing, including in the West Bank. And again, in the bigger picture, the whole genocide, the incremental cultural and physical genocide of the Palestinians, beginning in the Nakba in 1948, is still going on and on and on. That hasn't finished. So there has to be accountability, both for what Israel did in Gaza, but also in the understanding that it's ongoing, that Israel continues to commit genocide against Palestinians.
There have it, Professor Chief Halper. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Really, really appreciate your time. And yeah, I know we're going to be speaking a lot as it continues to unravel.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Go, Professor Chef Halper, coming to us live from Al-Quds, director of ICAHD. And yeah, giving us insights on, I think, a very, very important state of affairs. This ongoing genocide that we see unfolding in Gaza at the current moment, and this quote unquote ceasefire, which is holding on by a thread. But I think at this point, we can all agree that there's no ceasefire. We saw yesterday, 2 days ago, more airstrikes that were bolted down on Gaza, killing more and more people. And it'll be only interesting to see what the response will be from the international community. Well, again, Israel be held accountable in any shape or form, or will it be business as usual? But I think at this point, what we can, I don't know, take solace in is a bit of reprieve for the people of Gaza, for the children of Gaza. I think we've endured 2 years of horror, and whatever in shape or form the silencing of guns comes in, any kind of reprieve, no matter how short-lived it might become, I think it's very, very appreciated. I think it's very, very much too often when asked the people from outside who are passionate about the cause of Gaza and that of the Palestinian people, we often try and overanalyze the situation, while I can tell you for free, the people of Gaza at this point really don't care what shape or form does peace come in. They just want to have a few nights of peaceful sleep and being able to get food and water and medication for their children and their families. And we so much often try and overanalyze it that we get lost into the bigger picture, the true and lived realities on the ground that people of Gaza are facing. And I think for now, you can just appreciate this moment and hope that it lasts. And ultimately, the fight for peace, the fight for self-determination and reparation, most importantly, for the people of Gaza, is realized in our lifetime, from the river to the sea. We've come to the end of today's edition of News and Views. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'll be back with you again tomorrow for the Wednesday edition. We have a very, very important interview that we're going to be having, one that I think you guys are going to love, 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 love. So keep your eyes and ears tuned into Salam Media, and we'll be letting you know who we'll be talking to tomorrow. Otherwise, from myself, Salailo, and the rest of the team, it's Shap Shap for now.